everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Ida. I want to tell you a little bit about FemTech and give you a sense of what that segment is all about and where it is today. I also want to give you a sense of where I think it's heading in the future, and I also want to extend an invitation. So, I've asked my boyfriend to do the clicking because there was a little bit like, so. I had the idea for Clue, the startup that I co-founded in 2009, because I really wanted a new type of birth control. I wanted a type of birth control that honestly didn't suck. You know, I was really puzzled. How was it possible that there had been no innovation in that space for 60 years since the pill came out? We had been busy putting people on the moon and inventing the internet and a million other really wild innovations, and still, a woman didn't know which day she could actually become pregnant. I thought that was absurd. And I wanted to create what I needed and what I knew the world needed. A new type of birth control that was based on data. A type of birth control that could tell a woman with scientific precision where in her cycle she was and which day she could actually become pregnant. I simply wanted my phone to tell me, can I get pregnant today? Yes or no? Well, I was not a scientist. I was not a doctor. I was not a software engineer. I had no money, no contacts, and I was also pregnant. Nevertheless, in 2021, Clue got FDA clearance as the world's first 100% data-driven type of birth control. So how was that possible? Well, that's a long story that I will not tell here, but I'm writing about in a book. But what I do want to talk about is something that I think was very essential for it working out, which was cultural awareness. So together with a small handful of other startups that were working in female health and founded around 2013, we really became pioneers in a cultural shift that made the New York Times call 2015 the year the period went public. This was the beginning of FemTech, really, because as we started being able to talk about periods, this thing that culture had totally ignored and which women go through for 40 years of their lives, we could also start talking about all the other things in female health that urgently needed awareness. This is what the room looked like when I suggested the term FemTech at TechCrunch Disrupt in San Francisco in 2016. There was a whole part of life that tech had totally failed, had overlooked, under-researched in, underfunded, under-innovated in. Which is the part of life that is regarding the life experiences we have as people living in a female body. It's a part of life that's really close to heart. It does matter to not suddenly have blood running down your legs unexpectedly, or to not have a pelvic floor too weak to hold your pee. I coined the term because I wanted to bring more awareness to the startups building technology in female health. You know, people were building from this fringe of culture, from this area that was very unseen. And people misunderstood it to be niche. But you know, when you build something that addresses needs that half of the world population has, it's not niche. Women's health is so often about experiences that exist outside our cultural awareness. What it feels like to be a woman, what it feels like to have a female body is invisible. So much of what is intensely intimate and really impacts our lives happens in what I think of as the shadow area of culture. But what is so fascinating about technology is that innovation tends to come in these parts of culture that has just become visible. So we start building technology in these new parts of culture that we can suddenly see and talk about. So right now, this area where we can innovate in is expanding. There is more room in our culture to talk about what it is to actually be a woman and have female biology. It also means that we become more and more aware of all the things that technology has not addressed yet, all the areas where innovation is still lacking. And we get angry for good reasons. So now, 9 years later, 8 years later, 8.5, I don't know, soon 9 years later, we can see that it was indeed the beginning of a new sector in technology, where mostly women, tired of waiting, are building the technology that they need. And here are some examples. We have hardware and software for pelvic floor training, or a new form of non-hormonal based contraception. It's a capsule that you insert, which makes the mucus so sticky that sperms can't swim. Or a mini lab that allows women to do at-home testing for fertility and menstrual tracking. Or radically better equipment for ultrasound testing to figure out if people have endometriosis, something that right now, unfortunately, takes on average 7 years to diagnose, which is really way too long. So in the beginning, many FemTech companies, they would build things that were consumer-facing. And now we can see that there is innovation coming up that requires really deep integration into the healthcare systems. So that could be things like ultrasound equipment, also to diagnose osteoporosis, or better protocols based on data, which is actually women's data, because very often we are still doing a lot of medical stuff based on men's data. You're doing great over there. So the boundaries, both technologically and culturally, are expanding, and here are some more examples. We can use menstrual blood to do testing for biomarkers, which is a new, really exciting field because, of course, it's non-invasive, it's readily available. There's a lot of interesting stuff to be found in that substance. We can use apps for managing and really helping people who have chronic diseases like endometriosis or PCOS. Or sex toys that are collecting data on women's orgasms, which helps women who have vaginal pain, but also just help us all have better sex lives. Or what about detecting breast cancer in urine at home? I think that would be pretty cool. My mom had breast cancer. I wish she had known sooner. She lives, she's good, but still. So there are all really needed and new and super innovative products, and the list is growing every day. There's a lot of fascinating things being built right now in FemTech. And these are things that are also addressing things like mental health, fertility, longevity, bone health, brain health, as well as a number of other things where women's symptoms look different than they do in men. For instance, cardiovascular diseases. So, money. Almost $20 billion was invested into FemTech in 21. And though it fell to about 10 million in 23, the value of all FemTech companies rose from about 22 billion to 27 billion in the same period. So the FemTech companies that were out there and got invested into were getting more and more valuable. There are now 7 FemTech companies valued at over $1 billion. So you can build really huge, large, amazing, powerful companies in this space. Maven Clinic is an example of that. They have raised over $300 million, which to my knowledge is the most that any FemTech company has raised. And to be fair, they are an outlier. Most FemTech companies, they raise way less, and they often raise from funds that are really small. we still haven't seen massive investment into FemTech like we have in AI. And that's actually peculiar because we have a lot of data showing, one, that investing into female health is very good for economic outcomes, not just for companies, but for societies. Two, we know that women, they raise less money at lower valuations, even though they are more cash efficient and they create better returns. So investing into women and women building FemTech is actually really smart. Because it's also very clear that having female biology comes with a lot of maintenance and costs, and because of that, it is just an area where you can make a lot of money. There's simply a lot of money being spent on female health. So this is a list of all the regional organizations supporting FemTech companies. There are many companies being built, but there's also a lot of other things happening in FemTech. So we are seeing organizations like these being built. We see newsletters, podcasts, conferences, lots of activity, reports, many things in female health is happening. And women are building in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, and maybe here. I'm so curious if there's anybody here that are building FemTech. We've also seen political task forces. Because the public sector is also catching up, which is really amazing to see. They're becoming more aware that investing into women's health is very smart, as I said before, not just for the well-being of women, but for the well-being of societies and economies. I'd go as far as to say that I think actually investing into female health is urgently needed to bring our planet back on track. So major institutions such as the White House, the NHS in the UK, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and many others are really signaling a growing recognition that this is important. President Joe Biden just came out with an executive order saying that he's going to make sure that the US spend $12 billion on women's health research in the coming years. So it is truly great that the public sector is getting more aware, but again, it only happens in the areas where things are visible in culture. And there are still many things about the female body that either we just don't know scientifically or it's not part of our cultural sort of shared awareness. So I'll give you one example from my own life. I'm 45. At some point I'll go into menopause, but the thing is I have no idea when. I don't have a predictive analytics that will tell me when that might be coming up. I don't have the past 10 or 20 years of data on my hormonal life. I don't have a good sense what my hormones will do the next 10 years. So this is a great opportunity. Who would not want to know that? So again, lots of room for innovation in this space. So when I think about the future of FemTech, I'm very hopeful. I think we're going to see this continuation of explosion of innovation. But I will also say that I think we have to be really aware that we don't build a world where there's even less room to live in tune with our bodies as women, and where we don't use technology to fix symptoms and sort of become increasingly disembodied. You know, if we want to delay menopause or we want to build babies in labs, which are two technologies that people are already working on, I think we must ask ourselves, you know, are women's bodies really inadequate, or do we need to make more room in our societies and culture for the life we have with this biology? I also believe that it's really important that we keep regulating technology to protect users and users' privacy. And I also think that regulation is one way to make sure that innovation goes through some sort of democratic process. Who gets to decide what we build? I think that's very important, that it's not just a few tech people who decide that, but there is some sort of societal oversight. So this contraceptive capsule that I showed us a few slides back, it's an amazing innovation. It exists on the planet, but I can't buy it in Germany where I live. You know, I think it'll take a long time before it's readily available in the pharmacies down on the street in Germany or here in Armenia. So there is still a big challenge around making innovation commercially available and scaling things. So we need a lot of capital to make this innovation actually matter in everybody's life. We also need funding to start analyzing all the data that all these products are collecting, because all the examples I give you, you know, produce amazing new data sets, but we need money to actually learn to do something meaningful with this data and make it really matter to the people who gave the data. And of course, we also need funding to develop AI models and to make sure that these AI products are based on women's data as well, and that users' privacy are kept in integrity. Yeah, I have now been in this field of female health for many years, and I've been very lucky to meet many people telling me their stories, and I would say that people lack even the basic education on how our reproductive systems work. And of course, we need better sex education in school, but it's also a really, really powerful possibility for tech to educate. I just want to say that when we use technology to help people understand their bodies and expand culture, we are also really having a huge responsibility for, well, what culture do we then build? I think that's a question that everybody building technology must ask themselves. So we have many things to build yet, and I want to say that I really hope that we can involve many men on these journeys, because we need them as co-founders, as team members, as lawyers, as journalists, as investors, and also just as people cheering us on. FemTech is not only for women. All of society benefits when we build FemTech. And really, when we start taking women's health needs seriously. So women's health still only receive about 2% of venture capital, so very little. And I would say it's up to us in this room and many other people to really expand this cultural awareness. You know, we need to be walking into these shadow areas very bravely and bring them in there as well. And I'd like to extend an invitation. I'd say, go ask women and people with cycles about their needs, about their desires, about what is still too painful or too complicated. Ask them about their bodies, and I promise you, you will come back with a really inspiring, incredible list of business opportunities, of partnership ideas, of research questions, of all the areas where you need cultural liberation. And I would say, go run the service and innovate and do the clinical trials, because there are still so many issues that are unsolved in female health. And when you go and you ask people, and this is maybe especially to the men in the audience, you really have to listen very carefully, because what you will hear are about things that you don't know. It's a humbling experience, because there are things that you don't know that other people actually know, because we have lived different experiences. So I want to end by saying, if anybody here are entrepreneurs or thinking about becoming one, your biggest competitor is not the other startup that just got funding. It's not the ones you think that are your competitors. Your biggest competitor is that the world is not yet taking seriously what you're building, that the world still doesn't know how important it is what you're building. So we need not only technology and innovation and building tech, we also really need to innovate culture, and we need all genders to participate in that. because I believe that we can be one huge unstoppable movement, creating more space for women's experiences and more health for us and for the planet. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening, and I'd love to stay connected. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear what you're all building and what's happening here in Armenia. It's really a big honor to be here. Thank you so much.